Hello, I'm Brett Knowles from PM2Consulting.com. This short webinar provides an overview of some of the details around building your strategy map, capturing your existing strategy and making it available to the entire organization. We've been involved in the balanced scorecard arena since the initial research at Harvard in the late 1980s. Every single book that Drs. Kaplan and Norton have written cite our clients as best case examples, as do most of the other books focusing in on performance measurement and management. In this webinar, we'll be sharing some of the best practices we've picked up over the last 25 years. Many organizations begin with the question of why. Why is it we need to capture our strategy in a different way than we've done historically? Well, there's a bunch of reasons that organizations have given us over the years. The most common is it's a tool to help the communication of the strategy in a way that everyone can understand it, to make it clear to the organization what your priorities are, your expectations, and what the performance targets look like. The reason to do this is it turns out that less than 23% of employees typically know what their strategy is. And obviously, if the strategy is not top of mind, their ability to execute against it is greatly diminished. Secondly, alignment across your organization is important, and the strategy map gives the opportunity of describing through accountabilities and outcomes the sorts of things we expect from the organization. This allows management and stakeholders to better relate to their overall objectives. The reason for doing this is recent research indicates there's a 37% performance loss between what the strategy is committing to and what the organization is capable of delivering against. And that loss hits straight to the bottom line because the resourcing, scheduling, and everything else is based on that initial performance promise from the strategy. A strategy model enables decisive leadership, and a recent survey from Harvard Business Review indicates that over 70% of employees say that leadership's ability to make clear and concise decisions is the key contributor of performance loss against strategy. It allows us to build organization-wide agility. As the strategy map changes, the organization can chase those objectives quickly. And that's important because strategy, especially these days, is a continuous process that evolves as the economics, the business environment, exchange rates, and so on change. And finally, we need to make strategy everyone's job. It turns out that over 40% of personnel performance can be improved when we link their performance to the overall strategy. Now, I'm going to show you how to build a strategy model based on a human resources department case study. But the principles that we'll reveal here can be used to cascade instead of to human resources to any other department, or even different locations or different product groups, or actually even at the corporate level. Now, in most organizations, there's some form of strategy available. Sometimes it's just a strategy document. Other times, like this, it's been developed out through a series of graphics and better explanation of objectives and sub-objectives. In fact, in some organizations, they even take that corporate level strategy and cascade it down to describe what it means within any one department. So, that's a good starting point for most organizations. Here's what we know. Our research at Harvard told us that less than 80% of strategies fail. And they fail not because they're not clever, they fail because they're not executed. In other words, the broken part of strategy is not coming up with a new one, but executing the strategy that you have. So we shouldn't waste our time coming up with a new strategy because there's a greater than 80% chance you don't even know if the current one is correct or not. So we just take these existing strategy documents as the base. Now, not all organizations have documented their strategy. In many cases, we need to get the leadership team together and help them take out of their minds what is their view of strategy. And it's not that tough. All we need to do is get the right people in the room. We need to focus them on the few important objectives for the organization. And understand that in that room, not all players are equal. No different than in your family, your children have a voice to say about how you might, for example, spend month-end income. But at the end of the day, the parents need to decide whether you pay for the mortgage first or the Xbox. And finally, you need to understand you're not going to get the strategy map right the first time, or even the second or third time. It's an iterative process, and as you develop this capability, the quality of your strategy model will improve. So, let's talk about how we go about creating the strategy map. What we should be able to do is describe the strategy in a standard framework. Now, the framework we're going to describe here today is the Balanced Scorecard, but of course you could use any other framework you wanted to. In the Balanced Scorecard, for the private sector, our overall goal is to achieve financial success. To do that, we need to make sure that your customers, or for an internal department like Human Resources, the business itself, has their needs met. To meet their needs, you need the right internal processes in your department, and to build and maintain those processes, you need the right enablers. These 4 perspectives are the 4 perspectives of the Balanced Scorecard. In the private sector, in an independent business, your financial success is dependent on making your customers happy. To do that, you need the right internal processes. To do that, the right enablers. Now, let's go back to the framework. We're going to take that document we saw before that describes this organization strategy, and we're going to shake out of it the core strategic objectives. For example, it talks about leveraging technology. And we're just going to note those. You could almost think of doing this as post-it notes on a page. It talks about driving profitable growth. There are objectives in there that talk about promoting an effective workforce. And so we can go through the document and just extract what the core strategic objectives are. And in the case where we've cascaded those down to departments, we can take those other documents and begin to interpret what each department needs to do to contribute to success. And by the time we're done, we'll end up with a list of 5, 10, maybe as many as 15 strategic objectives. We now need to sort those by perspective. So let's take an easy one. Let's say drive profitable growth. Well, that's obviously a financial objective. If we take a look at promote effective workforce, for the Human Resources Department, that's what their customers expect from them. So that's a business objective. Something like attract talent, again, something that we need to do for our business customers. Retain talent, again, something we need to do for them. And by the time we're done, we have strategic objectives which fit into each of the different perspectives. Now, the trick is not to have too many, and often you'll find that some of these strategic objectives overlap with each other. In fact, when we take a look at those cascaded documents I showed you before, often we'll find the same objective described in 4 or 5 different ways. What we typically do is pick the one that is most memorable phrasing so that people understand it's been sourced from their own documents. The next step is to show the cause and effect relationship between these objectives. For this case, overall, our goal is to support driving profitable growth. To do it, there's 3 things we need to do. Promote the effective workforce. And to do that, we need to attract the right talent, we need to retain the talent, and we need to drive alignment. Now, how do we do those? Well, overall, we need to proactively support the business. And if we do that, that will help us attract the right talent. It will help us retain talent, and finally help us drive alignment. Supporting proactive business priorities are the 2 objectives of develop and deliver effective programs and optimize service delivery. Then these 3 enablers, cultivate a high-performance team, drive a performance culture, and leverage technology, support everything that's above. So this is the first part of a strategy model. What you'll notice is, first off, the wording is simple, typically just a verb and a noun. We want to try to avoid using ampersands because that's often an indication we're combining 2 concepts, and maybe we need to come up with a higher level concept that embraces both of those. Very few arrows. Typically we try to only have 1 or 2 arrows coming from every single box. We don't want them crossing over. See, it's got to be memorable. People have to be able to describe this to their friends, effectively in the elevator or in front of an impromptu meeting. The next step is we have to communicate relative importance. If this is our overall strategy, how do we allocate that 100% across these objectives? In this case, we've put a high focus on a number of objectives. If we take a look at this, we'll see that the objectives of a high-performance team, developing effective programs, proactive business priorities, and drive alignment have the highest weightings. They're all above 10%. So eventually we're going to call this a theme. We can see that overall we're describing this to be a key focus for the organization, or what this company calls R3, the right people in the right place at the right time. And they've used this as a framework to begin capturing what individuals in that organization should be prioritizing their activities on during the course of the year. Now, it's important to note that the weightings don't represent headcount or budget or even managerial focus. It's kind of a combination of those four things that tell us the overall strategic priority for this period of time. The objectives will remain the same across time, but the weighting will change as our strategic needs change across the year and across time. So let's just step back and take a quick look at some of the principles I've shared with you. Overall, the key principles are this. 1, we need to make sure that your strategy map has a few clear strategic objectives. 2, we want to show a simple cause and effect relationship to honor people and explain to them how success looks in this organization. 3, we need to weight those strategic objectives so people understand the relative importance of the different things inside the organization. So it needs to be strategic, understandable, directional, and memorable. Now, within this criteria, we can use different frameworks. So obviously, we can use the balanced scorecard framework as I explained it to you. But you could also use whatever the image is of your strategy, if that's a pyramid like the example we saw, or 7 pillars, etc. If that is what your organization relates to, you want to consider using that framework best you can. You can use other frameworks like Six Sigma or Lean or TQM, whatever the dogma is that your organization tends to follow when it thinks strategically. Or there may be frameworks available to you through your industry association or some sort of quality award like Baldrige or the European Quality Council and so forth. The net is the framework is less important than the key principles on the left. Now, where to from here? Well, that strategy model that we've developed, in fact, will allow us, in the next webinar, we're going to describe how we can use that to help determine a balanced scorecard. How do we add performance measures and help the organization understand the relative importance of different metrics based on the weighting. The third webinar in this series will take that and begin to show you how you can drill those strategic objectives down to actionable objectives at the tactic and task level. And then finally, the three of those combined will give us the fourth webinar, which will allow us to describe how you manage the business with this new set of tools. Thank you for your time.